Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today, Heval, on this beautiful Sunday morning. And I would like to welcome our audience as well. Thank you all very much for joining us today. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Heval Mohamad Kelli, a Syrian Kurdish refugee and a graduating cardiology fellow at Emory University. We're very proud of him. Congratulations, Heval.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today. And hello, everyone.
My pleasure. So, Haval, I wanted to bring you to the spotlight today because I think your story is going to be an inspiration to many of us. As we have all seen, your outstanding journey has been featured in hundreds of national and international news outlets, including CNN, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Guardian, and you were an invited guest by the Bush family. And you received recognition from Barack Obama. In his own words, he said, "Your resilience and dedication reflect the best of the American spirit. Your experience offers a shining example of the American dream." And I think, Haval, with your dedication to diversity and community service, you truly are recreating that dream for many others as well. You know, we hear about many success stories from time to time, and we all know that there's no success in life that comes in by chance. Every success story is full of tears and sacrifice and hard work and many bumps on the road, as well as resilience. But I think you have shown us that on this journey, if we work hard and aim well, and if we trust the Almighty, He is not going to let us slip. So thank you again for joining us today. And I'm going to start with my first question, Hava. So please tell me about your life in Syria and how you started to seek refuge in Germany. And as you speak, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a couple of pictures of yours as well.
Yes, thank you so much again for having me here. I just want to be clear. My story is a story of many refugees and immigrants and underserved communities. And I've just been very blessed and lucky to have the great mentorship to be able to make it this far. My name is Heval Kelli, and I lived in Syria. We had a great life. My father was a lawyer. My mom was staying at home, and we were doing very well. We were Kurdish, and everything life was great. We celebrated a birthday, had an amazing middle class life, and then one day the police stormed our house. Arrested my dad at his office. Beat my mom and beat me, and we didn't know what's going on. There was something about like accusing my dad of being against the government or something like that, which was false. They arrested him for 6 months and tortured him. My dad was lucky to come out. Eventually he paid himself out of there, and then his friends in the government told him he needs to leave because it's not safe anymore in that time. And that was around 1996. We went to actually Turkey and stayed there for a couple of months, and then we find out like it wasn't safe for us to go back. Next thing I know, I was on an airplane, and we landed in Frankfurt airport. And then I thought we were on vacation. Nobody told me what's going on. I thought like we're going to another European vacation, like we every year we did. And then, next thing I know, we landed in this building, this big building. They took us to the floor, and it was one bedroom, with two beds, and a bathroom share with the entire floor. And that was the refugee camp in Germany. And that was the winter of 1996. It was around September.
Wow. And how old were you at the time, Haval?
Yeah, all of that happened between age of 11 and 12. So when my dad was arrested, and I was 11-year-old, and I had like a 7-year-old brother too. So it was two of us and my mom and dad.
Oh, wow. So that must have been a huge trauma for a very young teenager. How did you cope with it? How did you feel at the time?
It's hard when when you're a refugee kid. I always tell people, when you are the oldest son or a daughter, you become the parents for the parents. So the second we arrive in Germany, we don't speak German, so I had to learn German. So I became the provider for my family to go translate. My parents were not allowed to work because we were on asylum. So because life was going so fast, there was really never a time to focus on the trauma. And for me, I thought we were going on a vacation, but then of course, when we end up in a refugee camp, I knew there was something different going on.
Gotcha. And for how long did you guys stay there?
So when we arrived to Germany, we applied for asylum, which means like you have to apply to the court to be accepted, like many people do now. Unfortunately, the court did not accept us. So we were transitioned from a refugee camp to another refugee camp. Eventually ended up in a small town in a mountain in Germany. It was interesting that they put us in a town of 2,000 people, but in Syria we lived in a town of almost a million people. And it was, Syria we don't see snow, so in the town we lived in the mountain, it was snowing and raining. I was one of the few people who looked like like a Middle Eastern guy, brown, dark hair. So I don't look like any of those kids in the school. So we lived there for 6 years, but most of the time we lived in refugee camps there.
I see. And I know that when you were back in Syria, you were an honor student, but when you went into Germany, we had joined all these, different kids to make more friends and to get some protection as well. You pretty much joined some gangs out there. So tell us about those experiences as well. How was it as a teenager to lose your friends and try to make new friends for yourself?
Yeah, I never forget that. In Syria, my parents were doing very well economically, so they sent us to private schools. So I was doing very well. In Germany, life changed. We live in now off of the government. We're not allowed to work, and it's obviously when we in Germany you walk to school most of the time. So when we come back, people know you are the refugee living in a refugee camp. It was a very, 3-story building, ugly looking. Everyone knew, and it was outside of the town. So when I went to school, there was only very few people in my school that looked like me. There were a few Turkish people, some people from Morocco. But in my class, I was the only one who looked like myself. So I was being harassed many times by people. I didn't understand the language, so for me it was very hard, And then I couldn't study while, I just left Syria by being beaten by the police. Now I'm in this new environment, living very poor. I'm not used to that. And now I don't have any friends and, I'm getting harassed. So the way I released my anger, I joined, some of the people in my class, like who looked like me, who spoke maybe some Arabic or some Turkish student came and said salam alaikum. Of course, I felt like related to them. So they provided protection, and and that's how we protected ourselves. We had no choice but to fight back. So within 6 months, I became one of the worst students in the school. As you see in the picture, we are trying to be all cool, and try to be like, to make sure to protect ourselves. And my grades went down. I barely spoke any German. The only German I spoke was curse words. But that was a mechanism of releasing maybe the trauma I experienced at the same time being angry about the situation.
Absolutely. And I know that you talk about that one teacher who chose to believe in you. So how did that one teacher communicate with you and, brought the best out of you?
So, when you're a refugee, people would send letters to our home. My parents would not be able to read it because they don't speak any German. So, the time came, they asked for my dad to come and, and speak to them about my progress. My dad, as like any, Middle Eastern Muslim father, he's dressed up and very proud to go to school. Even though we live in a refugee camp, he knew that I was a very good student in Syria. So we show up in the classroom, and the interpreter is telling my dad in Arabic how terrible I am and how I am like cursing the teacher and part of these gangs. And my father's in shock. But one thing that teacher told my dad, he's like, if someone could become so bad so quickly, he's like, because when your son walked in the first week, he was very quiet, very nice. But then all of a sudden, he's like very bad now. So there's a hope for him to change very quickly too. When he came home, my dad was like crying. He's like, oh, we left everything for our education for you guys to have a better life to protect you, and now you let us down. So the next morning, I went to my teacher. I was like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, I will help you to speak German better. So he'll meet with me every morning before class, teach me how to speak, invest in me, inspire me. And I still was friends with some of those guys. They were not bad guys. We weren't like, gangs, like, doing anything bad. We were just like people who trying to protect ourselves. I was still having friends like Turkish, Moroccan, Kurdish, Arabs, and hanging out with them. But I wanted to go to school, so after 2 years, I was able to go to the gymnasium. I'm sure, like some of people know, the German school system is different from America. They have a level of school, and gymnasium is like the highest school you could go to before you go to college.
That is so wonderful. I'm sure we all have that one teacher in our lives who chose to believe in ourselves and sort of brought the best out of us. That's so wonderful. And then how did you decide to come into the States, to the America?
So yeah, that's also an interesting situation. So because we were in asylum, which means every 6 months we had to really apply for temporary visa and with the fear to be sent back to Syria if rejected. So it was a very scary time. Every time my dad went to the court system to renew it, we thought if he doesn't come that night, we would just cross the border to Belgium and Holland because we were scared. We don't want to go back to Syria. So it eventually came to the point I find that out even if I finish gymnasium, I cannot go to college because in the German system I will not be a permanent resident. So that was kind of like, okay, well, why I'm studying for? I'm now, I'm driving 45 minutes with a bus to go to the next town gymnasium. So my dad, along with the church, they helped us to apply for, asylum status somewhere else. So they say, Canada is a little easier. Let's start with the US. US is harder. So after 2 years of back and forth driving to Frankfurt, I always tell people like we had all the immunization again, we did all these testing, and then we got accepted to come to the US after 2 years of just, vetting and examination.
And
So
how
that
did
was,
that feel? You
go
were
ahead.
leaving your country, you came into Germany initially, and then you were in another new country again with a new language, very different culture. So who greeted you? How did you get into the system, and how did you find a house? How did you settle down?
So yeah, also American refugee system is a little different than Germany. Germany, when you apply for asylum, they put you in refugee camps and transition you eventually to other camps. We were happy to come to US, but we had no family. I didn't speak English. Nobody in my family spoke. The only thing we know about the US was like, Levi's jeans and hamburger and McDonald's. That's the only thing we knew about the US. We were preparing ourselves to come. The 9/11 happened, unfortunately. Uh, so we thought, America's not going to take a Muslim family. My mom wears a hijab. My last name is Mohamad Kelli. So then, we got a call say, hey, you have 3 days to leave the country. You have your passport. So we're like, where are we going? They say, you're going to, to Georgia, Atlanta. And the reason actually they sent us to Atlanta because we asked for weather similar to Syria because, we were living in the snow. So, and next thing you know is, September 25th, we land in the middle of the night in Atlanta. And then we had someone greet us at the airport and they make sure, you will see a lot of refugees carry these bags, the white bag called IOM. And those bags you get recognized by your social worker in the airport. So we drove to our apartment in Clarkston, Georgia, a small town outside of Atlanta. And they put us in an apartment complex. They had an apartment ready for us. The apartment had like, 1 or 2 beds, maybe a couple of chairs. And then was interesting part is when I arrived to the apartment, we were very hungry. So they had bread and a couple like other stuff, cheeses, but they had this yellow thing, and I'm like, why do they have expired Nutella for us? In Germany you eat Nutella, but actually peanut butter, so peanut butter cream. And it was the first encounter with American culture. But we were very scared because people told us, like if you look like a Muslim, you might get beaten up. Like during that time, it was like right 2 weeks after 9/11. We stayed at home. We arrived, I think, about Thursday or Friday. We stayed all weekend. On a Sunday morning, we had these people knocking our door. And my parents was like, you're 18 years old, go to the door and see where they need something. I didn't speak barely any English. We thought, like, I looked around, I saw all these, old white people, knocking on the door. I thought they're from the FBI coming to investigate a Muslim family. But yeah, but they kept knocking, and then we opened the door, and through using a dictionary and welcoming them, find out they're a member of All Saints Episcopal Church. They came to welcome us to the US and bring us food and furniture.
Isn't that so wonderful? And I think this was only 2 weeks after 9/11 happened in this country.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, right? Like, I thought like, it's gonna be a very difficult time. Again, for people from outside of the United States, Georgia's in the South and it's very conservative. We live in a very conservative Christian, area. So people might think like, oh, like, they'd be more resistant, but it was the opposite. Like we had so many American, Christian and non-Christian, come welcome us around that time. And that made us feel safe. We actually had more native people from America come welcome us than we had in Germany. So my experience was very different in the United States than it was in Germany.
That sounds so wonderful. And then you guys were kind of on your own with no financial support. You did not know how to speak English. Now you had to look for a job. I know that your father couldn't work because he was sick at the time, and your mother couldn't work either. And you have a very young brother, he couldn't work either. So you, as an 18-year-old, you actually had to go through find a job and support your family financially. So how did it work?
Yeah, so again, it's also all about interesting how the refugee status system every country is different. In Germany, if you're asylum status, you cannot work. The government has to support you, but it's very limited. In the US, the government only gives you like about 3 months of support and rent. They expect you to, get a drive license, find a job, speak English, and be on your own. And then usually the churches and other refugee organizations help out until you get on your feet. So here I am in Germany, 18 years old. I mean, in America, 18 years old. They put me in high school. I was a 12th grade in Germany. So I'm in my last semester of high school in America to graduate. I don't speak English. We are in our second month. No, my mom cannot find a job. She's this 45-year-old woman wearing a hijab, doesn't speak English. Right around 9/11, who's gonna hire her? My dad had a heart attack, and my brother was 14. He couldn't work at that time. He was in a working age. So randomly, my mom, ate at this restaurant, asked him like if I could, work there. She's like, "Well, we don't have a job for a woman. We have a job for a guy to wash dishes." So, I take a bus and a train every day after school. I finish school at 4 o'clock. And then at night, I drive back, work like, 30, 40 hours all weekend long to support my family until my mom a year later found a job at a daycare center. So that's our life. And I put people in mind, like, I go in the morning to school at 7 o'clock. I'm trying to learn English, finish at 3:30, go to the bus, take a train and another bus, go wash dishes until 10, 11, come home, trying to do some homework again. And then all weekend long do that while I'm trying to learn English and I, apply for college because I wanted to go to college, and not to take the SAT, the TOEFL test. But all of that also was very blessed. People came and taught us English on Sunday in our home. I had my teacher, my English teacher, helped me apply. She taught me how to speak English better. And then eventually I applied, and got accepted to Georgia State University, where I started my college in 2002.
Mm-hmm. That is so wonderful. And how did you meet with Dr. Lutuf? How did you
That was
decide
also,
to
sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
how did you decide to go into medical school? Because in this country, getting into medical school is not easy. It's very competitive. So how did you get there? How did you decide to become a doctor at the point?
That's also a question I was trying to find out exactly where the started. In Germany, I had a friend who had, leukemia and he died eventually. And I was with him in the hospital and watching how doctors take care of people, regardless of their background, was inspiring. But again, when you're a refugee, you don't think about that in that time. I was very young. When I came to Germany, when America, I realized, okay, I lost everything in Syria. I lost everything again in Germany. What can I do? And I wanted to do something to serve my people, and medicine was one thing I wanted to do. But then, again, I am a refugee, live in a very poor community in America. Our neighbors are not doctors. I'm washing dishes, and I wash dishes across from Emory University Hospital. But when you're a dishwasher cleaning a table, a young person, people don't think of you. You could be one day a physician. You are there to them. You're a ghost. So my brother actually got accepted to a private school in high school to play soccer, and randomly he mentioned to one of the girls that I want to be a doctor, but I don't know anyone. And she happened to be the daughter of Dr. Latouf. She told her dad, "There's a guy who was washing dishes. He wants to be a doctor. His brother's a soccer player. He doesn't know anyone." So she made her father call me one day. And her father called me. He's from an Arabic background. And she was very suspicious. I'm like, why would a heart surgeon, call me and talk to me? Like, I'm just this poor refugee. I thought he from the Syrian government initially, honestly. And my father was very afraid. But then I went to meet him in his house. He invited me, and here I am. I'm driving. This is 2 years in America. I'm driving this very old car. I get to his house. He lives in a very nice neighborhood. It didn't look like me coming meeting him for mentorship. It looked like I'm coming to cut his grass. Like that's how my car and I looked. So he welcomed me and told me, "I want to help you," and we became, friends. And he told me, he made me believe that I have access to someone. Although I didn't meet with him that much, it was all about, through email and texting sometimes. But his presence in my life really allowed me to make sure that I uh, believe in myself. So now, I arrived in America September 2001. I went to Georgia State, finished in 2006. It was hard to apply to medical school. I'm only been 4 years in America. My English is good, but not amazing. I took the medical test twice actually, and I applied twice. And I tell people it's tough, even though I was working very hard. I didn't lose my hope because I had good mentor. And then in 2008, I started in Morehouse School of Medicine and finished in 2012 and started my internal medicine residency at Emory. So pretty much, 10 years later, I went from washing dishes across from the same hospital where I started my residency training.
When you say that, I just want to tear up. I mean, that is just so wonderful because these places are a block from each other, right? The place where you wash the dishes and the place where you was trained as a medicine resident, they're literally a block from each other. So that's very inspirational. And I think that brings us to the importance of mentorship as well, right? So all of these kids actually they have an amazing potential to reach their dreams and their goals. So I think it is very important for many of us to actually go back and give back to the community as well, and tell these kids that they can actually achieve their best dreams in this country.
You're
And,
right. And
mhm,
now it's a little easier to mentor, right? Because before in my time, internet and social media wasn't as present as now.
very
Now
true.
you have everyone as at your fingertips, and you just need connection and network to really stay inspired.
That is very true. Very true. And then, so you finished your internal medicine training at Emory, which is one of the best medical schools in the country. And then, how did you decide to become a cardiologist?
So it's also a great question. I wanted to always, when you go to medical school, you change your mind about what you want to do. I wanted to do surgery initially to help people because I lived in a very poor community. And the only time, the emergency ambulance came to our neighborhood, either because someone got shot or if someone had a heart attack. Poor, underserved community are high risk of having both. So, I was inspired. I couldn't be a surgeon. I just didn't have the technical skills and, the patient to be one. And so I decided to go into something where I actually could talk more to patient and more engaging and see them in the clinic. So I decided to do cardiology because, everyone knows someone who had heart disease, and it's one way to prevent it too. So I went into, and eventually I started my, fellowship. I first did some couple years of research, and then I did my clinical research, fellowship in cardiology. And interesting, I'm graduating in June. Like I only have 1 month left to finish my fellowship.
I know, that's wonderful. Congratulations again. We're very
Thank you
proud
so
of
much.
you.
Oh yeah, thank you very much.
And then, Haval, as you have been through all these stages and as you achieved and accomplished yourself, you didn't stop there. You actually decided to go back and give back to the community. So, and this huge effort was recognized by President Bush, by President Barack Obama. So tell us your interaction with them as well. So how did all those recognitions come through?
I when I showed up, I remember when I went to my high school. My high school, only 40% of people graduated. It was a very poor community, and many of the refugees didn't have access to doctors and nurses and pharmacists to be inspired to become into healthcare field. So one of the things I did, I was like, I made it. I'm leaving my little small town, but what about people behind me? I made it because I was lucky to find a mentor through my brother. But how about if I make luck and opportunity? So I went back to my high school and told them I want to start a program where we can mentor kids to go into medicine. And our focus was to connect them with, doctors and medical students. So once a month we go and do, medical cases, tell them about how to apply to medical school. And from out of that program, we had about, you know, we expanded from within 3 years, we expanded to 11 high school and colleges in Georgia. And we hosted conferences. And the whole focus about it is just being present in the communities, refugees, immigrants, poor American who don't have access to doctors and professional. So, and that will let the story, someone, find out about my story and what I'm doing. And next thing I know, someone, told, I guess, send a letter to the White House about my work. And that was around, when President Obama was the president. I got a letter from him, and that was something I never imagined. I come from a country like you. You don't see the president or even like any of his people. You're not that close. Get a letter from the United States president was really inspiring. And then I was nominated for an award by the George Bush Foundation, and and then when George Bush, the father, passed away, when they did his funeral in Washington, I was invited to be one of the guests, and I received the award, after his passing. So that was again for me as someone who came to the United States, and honestly though, I didn't do anything magnificent. I just really went back to my community to help people and want to make sure like that people like me have the opportunity to become who I am, better even than going to medicine.
That's so wonderful. I mean, you're very humble, Heval, but I think what you did, you initiated a huge legacy for this country, right? You actually started to invest into your own community and have all these kids, all these young, generous, hardworking kids actually grow up in their best way and actually come back and join the community as well. So I think what you did was actually huge. If you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and show this little video of yours that talks about your mentorship program. There you go.
My name is Heval Mohamad Kelli. 15 years ago, I came to this country as a Syrian refugee. I was washing dishes at nights and weekends to support my parents because my father couldn't work. And the restaurant is 1 block away from Emory University, where actually I trained as a cardiology fellow today. And it was hard, to think about becoming a doctor when you're learning English and struggling as a refugee. And I feel the obligation as a physician that my service goes beyond patient care. I need to invest back into the community. So we started the Young Physician Initiative. The Young Physician Initiative is a novel interactive program that we meet at least once or twice a month for 30 to 45 minutes, where we go through various sessions. You have to be right or wrong, it's all a possibility. Question about it?
They are so smart and so engaged, and obviously a lot of them have come here as immigrants, and they are very resilient. They've already been through a lot, and their determination to learn and to go forward in their career is really inspiring. Thank you.
I want to give back, not just to my community, but to my parents for all the suffering and hard work they've done.
My sisters are supporting him, are doctors, so I just want to be like him. This is my dream and my goal, so I will do it definitely.
When I see each student at Clarkston High School, I see myself. They inspire me every day. The greatness of this country is our interaction and diversity. If I, as a refugee, could come here and become a physician 15 years later across from the restaurant where I used to wash dishes, this is the American dream. Everyone could do that.
Okay. That was a very inspirational video of yours as well. So, so looking backwards, Heval, you've been through so much, right? Many bumps on the road, many challenges. You felt hopeless multiple times in your life, especially as a very young person going through all these stages. How did you bounce back every time you felt hopeless, every time you felt down, maybe even depressed? How did you actually bounce back and continue to fight for yourself and for this country?
That's also, comes from believing in yourself. Most importantly, my mother was played a big role in my life. Me watching my mom going back every morning, waking up at 5 o'clock to, make us our breakfast. So, because, we couldn't afford to buy breakfast at school. So from her coming late at night and working at home and doing all of that so me and my brother could go to school, that was a big thing to have, the family member to invest in us, but also in God. We made it this far because God blessed us, and because now I'm blessed. My brother's also a surgeon now too, so he's actually finishing general surgery, doing fellowship in trauma. We want to give back. Yes, God blessed us, but we want to give back to the community. And that's what kept us going, being in a community surrounded by people who support us, but also be able to support others. That give us the motivation to be able to keep going. And, I tell people, you just keep investing in your community and others, and God will invest in you.
That is so wonderful. This might be a cliche question, but I'm very curious to hear about this. So do you have a life mantra, something that you live with? What is your mantra in your life?
I think like for me it's important. I tell everyone and everyone I help. I was like, when I do something for you, you should do the same thing for others. So when you are blessed and given the opportunity, and God opened the roads for you to become who you are, make sure you go back and invest in others, because God and others will invest in you. And that's really what I do. Like, that's why it's so beautiful about medicine. I could go to my job, but also I could go and help my community on my free time and volunteer in clinics and inspire other people to go into medicine. So, and the more you do that, the more, God protects you and invests in you too.
That's very true. And I think the one other thing that you're doing, Heval, is you're actually connecting people. You're actually connecting the American people with refugees, and actually, I think making that connection, you're investing to the entire future as well. You're actually letting all these people get to know each other. And especially now that we're going through all these racism crisis, and we all know that those things originate from not knowing each other, not getting enough knowledge about each other. So you are actually fighting with discrimination and racism in a way that to me sounds amazing. You're connecting people so that they can actually get to know each other better, so we don't go through these crises and complications in the future for our next generations as well. So thanks for doing that as well, Halal.
No, thank you so much. It's all come from our teaching, and like if you look at all the prophets and mention our religion, they all what they did was going in a community and being present and helping others, and that's how you fight racism and hate. It's very hard to hate something and I realize most of the time in America, when people have something against someone, a certain group, like for example against like people like Muslim like us, it's because they maybe never met a Muslim and they heard about it on the news. So once they meet someone like you and me and our families, they realize it's not what the news is telling them. So it's very hard for them to keep hating, so they changes their mind. And and you take it to the next level when you're helping someone, like you are a Muslim woman, and when you see patients and they see you taking care of them and be nice, creates that change. So service and community is the best way to address that.
That's very true. And the other thing that you have done, Haval, you actually brought this to the next level, right? You actually became a voice for the refugee community as someone who has been through that life and achieved significant amount of achievements in your life. And you brought that to the attention of all the authorities as well. And I think what you have done will definitely serve the next generation as well, because people are going to be more knowledgeable about what a refugee can do. And I'm sure with that, the authorities will definitely open their gates and their doors and support the refugee families as well.
Of course, I think the last 5 to 6 years in America, with the rise of anti-refugee sentiment and people don't want to take refugees, especially when we face in the worst crisis of humanity, right? The over 70 million people right now are refugees in the world, and only 1% get a chance to leave their country or a refugee camp to come somewhere and have a good life. So it's important for us, people like me who achieve what I achieve, is to speak up and show an image. And again, I tell everyone, not everyone can be a doctor or someone in my field, but there's all these people who work as cashier and construction and food services. They're all making a difference in a community, and we need all of them to be part of a community, and we need to give a voice for them to change people's mind to accept more refugees.
That's very true. All right, Haval, it was wonderful to have you today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I tried to incorporate the questions that I got from the audience before the conversation. So this is gonna be it. Thank you for all the wonderful messages that you have been giving to the youth. I just wanted to ask one last word from you for the youth. What would you like to give them as one take-home point from this conversation?
I think believe in yourself, and remember, when it gets hard, it makes you stronger. And the best advice I got, always ask, because if you don't ask, the answer is no. So make sure you believe in yourself and ask people to help you with your journey. You'll be shocked how many people want to actually be there for you, but they wouldn't know if you don't ask. So, and again, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook too. So I'm always trying to answer as many messages of people I can help with. So again, I'm only a story of many other refugees and immigrants and poor people who made it. So there's nothing special about what I did. It's just work hard and believe in yourself.
That's so wonderful, Heval. It was a pleasure to have you today. Thank you for sharing all the wisdom and the journey with us today. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and end this session.